Apple Bloom knocked on her sister's door, wondering why she hadn't come out yet. "Applejack?" she called out, but Applejack didn't answer. Apple Bloom turned the knob and peeked inside, seeing her sister laying flat on her back in her bedroom, arms crossed and head drooping down the side of it, touching the floor. Applejack paid no mind to her sister's entry. Instead, she just glared angrily at the wall in front of her. "Sis, what's wrong?" Apple Bloom asked. "Why are you acting so glum?"
"It's Fluttershy. She won 1,000,000 bits in the lottery," Applejack complained. "1,000,000 bits I should have won if I just would have been smart and picked the right lottery ticket. But nope, I had to be stupid and pick the wrong one."
Applejack sighed.
"And now I'm gonna be poor forever and spend the rest of my days on a farm constantly surrounded by ponies who love me."
"What? I don't see the problem with that. AJ, money doesn't buy happiness. Sure, it's nice to have money, but it doesn't buy you happiness. Seriously, what is wrong with you? I mean, the consolation prize without money, you still got a family. I mean, that's something valuable. Money you can get and spend any way you want. You can get money one day and have none the next because you spent it all the previous day. You can have money for a lifetime, who knows? But still, money can come and go, but come on. Family is more valuable than any bits. Seriously, AJ, get your priorities straight." Apple Bloom climbed up on the bed and enveloped her sister in a hug. "I don't know how that feels, sis." Applejack hugged back because she enjoyed hugs, especially hugs that were delivered by itty bitty tiny little hooves.
"Those were the best kinds of hugs,"
Applejack mused and decided to smile even though she didn't really want to. "Hey, Applejack, if you're glum about Fluttershy having 1,000,000 bits and you don't, why don't you just take it from her?"
"Apple Bloom!" Applejack gasped. "Are you suggesting I steal Fluttershy's money?"
"Well," Apple Bloom insinuated, "it's not stealing if she willingly gives it to you, right?" Applejack glared at her sister.
"Apple Bloom?"
Applejack spoke sternly.
"Are you suggesting I am to seduce Fluttershy in order to get all that money that I want for my own possession?"
Apple Bloom smiled sheepishly and shrugged. "What's the point of having country girl charm if you ain't gonna use them?" Applejack tapped her chin and thought of the sentiment.
"You know what, Apple Bloom?"
Applejack grinned. "I think you're right." And we've lost her. Well, I wonder how long it'll take for Applejack to get her soul back. Let's read on and see. Fluttershy stared at the ceiling as she laid in a huge pile of money that rested on the floor of her cottage. It was silent, even with the animals scurrying around. It felt incredibly lonely. "I've got all these bets," Fluttershy sighed, speaking to no pony in particular. "And I just don't know what to do with it all." Fluttershy shifted and the money scrambled as she turned to her side. She picked up a bit and looked at it. "Maybe I should buy a bigger house," she mused. No. Even if I did, I'd have no pony to share it with." Fluttershy frowned. Fluttershy threw the bit back into the pile inside again. She was going to die alone. The door said, followed by a third knock. Fluttershy lifted the door in surprise before jumping off her money pile and trotted off to the door. With a gentle pull, she opened the door and gasped at the sight in front of her. It was Applejack. Hatless! With an alternative hairstyle of braided deliciousness.
"Hello, Sugar Cube."
Applejack grinned, throwing her braided mane around in a sexy manner. "Applejack! Your hat!
I left that dirty old thing on the farm, Applejack swiftly informed. Mind if I come in? Fluttershy blushed and hid a smile behind her hoof as she opened the door wide enough for her friend to step in. Applejack looked around the cottage as she stepped in and glared at the huge money pile that laid on the floor doing nothing but being useless. She swatted the door shut with a flick of her tail and turned to her skittish friend. You know, Fluttershy, I think you're mighty pretty, Applejack growled playfully as she approached her friend.
Gosh, Applejack,
Fluttershy grinned wider under her blush.
What are you saying?
I'm saying I could do stuff to you, Fluttershy. Stuff that no pony else has ever done to you, Applejack said with a smug grin as she leaned closer towards her friend. Why don't you go lie on top of that huge pile of bits, and I'll show you first hoof what I'm gibbering about. Fluttershy swallowed nervously and stood almost petrified in place before she finally walked over to her million bits. She threw herself on her stomach into the pile, and Bits scrambled at the impact.
Like this?
She asked, looking back at Applejack. Yeah, just like that, Applejack answered softly and trotted over to her friend's disposition. Applejack climbed up on Fluttershy and began pressing her hooves into her back, earning a squeak from the Pegasus. Oh, Fluttershy, Applejack blew into her ear. You've got a lot of tension in your back. I can tell because my hooves are touching it.
Applejack?
Shh. Just be quiet and let me work out all this tension. Applejack hushed and began running circles with her hooves into Fluttershy's back. But not too quiet. Fluttershy moaned in pleasure as Applejack kneaded her hooves in all the right places. Applejack's hooves traveled from her neck down to her back, massaging not too gently nor too roughly into her body. Fluttershy breathed heavily as she became more and more relaxed, with a lot of tension simmering away. Applejack's hoofs continued their journey and went further and further down along her spine, stopping atop her flank at the hilt of her tail. Fluttershy moaned as Applejack's hooves split in the middle and ran down her flank, each hoof now caressing her cutie mark. You've got a lot of tension in your flank, Fluttershy. Luckily for you, I'm gonna need all that tension out, Applejack whispered as she began circling Fluttershy's cutie mark with her hoofs, kneading gently into her coat.
Yes, Applejack! Need my flank!
Fluttershy blushed deeply as she wiggled her flank in motion to the massage. Fluttershy's shivering wings slowly unfolded and gave out a minuscule flutter as she drew in a loud breath under the platonic pleasure of Applejack's hooves, before finally sagging all the way into a pancake and drooping down off the money pile onto the floor in blissful exhaustion. Applejack grinned as she watched the Pegasus panting on the floor. She was in her power now. That feel good, Fluttershy? Applejack smirked.
Oh gosh, yes, Applejack. That was amazing.
Fluttershy panted as she looked up towards her friend. Applejack chuckled. That's great, Fluttershy. Now I hope you don't mind if I take all that money that's cluttering up your pretty floor, do you? Fluttershy turned and looked at her million bits, then back at Applejack.
Actually...
What? Applejack asked sternly. Are you saying that you're not gonna pay me for my special million bit massage I just gave you? Is that what you're saying? Fluttershy fell silent and looked with pleading eyes at Applejack. She'd been flim-flammed.
I guess not,
Fluttershy murmured after being shown no sympathy. Applejack smiled. Good. That's what I thought. With her tail, Applejack swooped 1,000,000 bits into a nearby saddlebag and threw it on her back and headed to the door. Fluttershy sat up and watched Applejack leave through the door. She frowned. Not only was all her money gone, but now she was alone. Again. Fluttershy sat deep in thought, wondering if now would be an appropriate time to cry. She missed her money, but even more so, she missed Applejack. Fluttershy began her crying procedure, starting with the quivering lip, followed by the deep frown and furrowed brows, with a high-pitched squeak of sadness. Her eyes began to water. Fluttershy jumped and looked towards her front door that had been slammed open. In the opening stood Applejack. "Fluttershy!" Applejack cried out. I can't do it!" Applejack took her saddlebags off of her back and threw them violently to the ground, causing them to spew out 1,000,000 bits all over her floor. "I can't use my sexy country trying to scam you out of your 1,000,000 bits, no matter how envious I am of your fortune," Applejack exclaimed sadly, hanging her head in shame. Fluttershy stared at Applejack with unshed tears glimmering in her eyes. Her lip quivered and her teeth clattered violently as the tears began to sipper down her cheeks. She threw herself at Applejack, tackling the mare to her back. Applejack grunted and looked up in shock at Fluttershy, who sat on top of her crying. "I don't care about the money, Applejack," Fluttershy whimpered, dripping tears onto Applejack's chest. "I just don't want to be alone." Applejack blushed as she stared into Fluttershy's crying eyes. "I was happy when you came by, even happier when you put your hooves on me." Fluttershy smiled under her barrage of tears. "It filled me with hope that maybe I wasn't going to die alone, and that maybe my special somepony is out there somewhere, plucking apples under the sun, wishing just like me that she had somebody to hold her tightly at night when it seemed like no pony left her." "Fluttershy," Applejack blushed deeply. "Are you saying—" "Can I kiss you, Applejack?" Applejack stared at Fluttershy in silence, feeling as though her thumping heart was the only thing that made a sound in that silent moment. Eventually, she smiled. Applejack sat up, holding Fluttershy on her lap as she stroked her hoofs alongside Fluttershy's face, gently wiping away the tears that dressed her yellow cheeks. "All right. But only between the eyes, Sugar Cube. Only between the eyes." Fluttershy smiled as she leaned forward, gently placing a peck between Applejack's eyes. She stared into Applejack's beautiful green eyes as she withdrew from the kiss. Applejack smiled her beautiful smile as she wrapped her hooves around Fluttershy and pulled her into an embrace. Fluttershy returned the hug tightly, letting her breaths flow freely in and out through Applejack's mane. "Applejack?" "Yes, Fluttershy." "Need my flank again?" Support me on Patreon. Subscribe and make sure to ring that notification bell to know when I post new content. And please, feel free to join the Lotus Garden. Links in the description. Thanks for listening, and look forward to more. Good night, every pony.